I just finally finished the last of Professor Jiang's um, seminar on Dante and the Divine Comedy. And while I still plan to read it myself and kind of go through it, I have a couple books that are actually before it. I have an agenda that I put for myself, and I want to read in the order that these were written. So I want to read the Iliad and the Odyssey, and then I want to read the Aeneid before I finally read Dante's Inferno. Um, and I keep referring to it as Dante's Inferno because that's the only way. That's all I knew. I honestly um, didn't know that there was more than just the Inferno. I thought that that was the whole thing. So that's going to get into my first point I wanted to bring up. Um, but the Divine Comedy is it's on my list, but I have other things I have to get through first, and I kind of got caught up trying to finalize books that I was reading so that I can continue moving forward with that. Um, but the first point I wanted to get to is the fact that um, I only really knew Inferno, and it was a question that was brought up because everyone mentioned like Inferno, and it was like, what's your fascination with Dante's Inferno? Like, why does everyone read that? And it's because that's what's taught in school. That's the only thing that's taught in school. And I think the main reason why that's what everyone reads is because one, it's seen as the starting point, so that's all we have time to get through. Two, it's because hell is um, easier than purgatory to read. I believe like Inferno is easier to read than purgatory, or is more comprehensible, right? There's more going on, there's more comprehensible stuff, it's more of an enjoyable read to just the layman, right? And so um and we can't read Paradise because our schools are non-religious, and so by reading Paradise you're you know talking about God, and that's not supposed to be in school, right? So that's why um, Dante's Inferno is a part of our curriculum, right? Because I think I did read Dante's Inferno. Do I remember anything of it? Did we actually finish the whole thing? I honestly don't know. Um, but I remember it being a thing for one of my classes in high school or whenever. I have no idea. But no one really reads it because uh, no one that's the only thing anyone knows, because that's the only thing we get introduced to, and that's the only thing that's really feasible to teach in a school, and so that's what's taught in school. Um, see, I have some notes here to try and keep track of all the things I wanted to speak on. Um, and so um, I have some other notes in here for other things, so I'm gonna. But I wrote here, it is because hell is not holy, and so it is not connected to religion in the same sense, and therefore is seen as acceptable to read with those of different religions or beliefs, or the lack thereof, mainly the lack in our world today. By denying heaven and paradise we live in, embody, and exemplify hell. We can recognize the great work, but we cannot recognize God. That is why it is also taught very differently than the artistic intent um, was. Uh, cre- uh, it's taught differently than the artistic intent it was created with, right? So there was a certain intent, right, which was to provide spiritual awakening, but schools can't teach it that way because they're not supposed to be teaching religion. And so that's why it gets read purely from a linguistic standpoint and things along those lines, like, oh wow, this writing is good, but they can't really dig deep into why it's so good, because to do that is to go against laws or mandates of schools, and so that's why it's not a thing. But moving on to my next thing, this is more. So that was my response or my opinion on that question that was brought up. I think it was partially answered anyway, but this one I really did have. This is my first critique, and this is an opinion that Jiang seemed pretty confident in and pretty defiant about, and that is that all great works come from a single person. All the best works come from a single person. Homer was a single person, right? It has to be a single person because that's just how it is. And I don't agree. And my reasoning here is not the point of this to come together and build one great society. They are not one person, but they are one mind, right? So you even say later on, let's co-create together, right? What is co-creation if not an assimilation of a group into a single mind that can build one creation? If all of you are of like mind and you work together to create a story, how is that any different than a single person writing it, right? If you're all channeling the divine, or one person's channeling the divine, what is the difference? I don't think that it has to be one person that creates the best works. It's just in the modern day, or even in past times, it's far more likely that a single person will write a great work, because to get a collective group on that same wavelength is very difficult, right? You have to get people up to speed, and when there's no material to do that with, how do you do that, right? So now we have, as you said, your mission is going to be, is to spread Dante's Divine Comedy, right? Because by reading that, you're exposed to a great work that gets you into a certain mindset, and from there you can co-create together because you're on the same playing field, right? You're of the same mind. But to get to that level without these works is very difficult, right? And so that's why I think that Homer is actually is not a man, and this is my own theory, right? This is my own opinion, so it's not really necessarily based on any facts here, but I thought it was interesting to consider, so I'm going to speak about it. But I don't think Homer was a man, and I don't think that Homer was an individual. I think Homer is like a pen name. It's kind of like just a name they came up with to hide their identity, and the reason why they hid their identity is because if they didn't, then it probably wouldn't have been as, like, the Iliad and the Odyssey wouldn't have been as big as they were had people known who wrote them, because who wrote them was most likely women, and in my opinion, like homosexual women. And my reason for this is the name itself is Homer, and that basically means, like same lover or something along those lines. Like we have homosexuals. Air is like a root for love, and so homo is like same love, something along those lines. So is it a perfect match? I don't know, but I feel like it's on the nose pretty hard, and that's on purpose, because no one would believe that a woman could write this, right? Because that was just the men's, own arrogance of the time. But at the same time, it has a message in it that has inspired people for thousands of years. And so my backing behind this to go further is uh, there's not a lot of works that survive of the poet Sappho um, currently. Like there's some scraps that have been found, but there's not a lot of completed works. And what has been found is a lot of love poems and specifically targeted at other women. And so while it may not, like, a part of me feels like Sappho had a big role in creating the Iliad and the Odyssey, because she was an influential, like a very popular and influential poet at the time. She was not the only one, right? So I feel like it either she was a part of the mystery cult that was the people that wrote the Odyssey and the Iliad, or she was, the people, one of the people that wrote it, right? And so that is just me and my gut feeling on that. It just feels right to me, so that's why I say that. But the poet Sappho was a part of a seemingly female mystery cult around the time of Homer, who focused on seemingly female or same-sex love. The name Homer can be read as same lover, as homosexual is used today. This was a trademark without outright saying anything. It was subtle, and so you can see the Iliad and Odyssey as forgiving. All right, so this is also why I feel this, because this is also my opinion, but there was in my in my opinion, say it again, a female centric dominated society during or before the Bronze Age, and there was, because of that, there was a high elevation towards women, and then we had the Bronze Age collapse, and that was all gotten rid of, right? And then in this transition period, that's when the Iliad and the Odyssey are written, and these female mystery cults still existed. And so while it would have been still ancient history by this point, the Bronze Age collapse would have been somewhat known, like, but through myth and legend, right? And so it wouldn't have been completely gone, I think, by this time. Whereas nowadays, like, we don't even know that this really existed. And so I feel like because of this betrayal and this overturning of the gender dynamics from women being in charge to male dominance, right? We have the patriarchy now, right? Whereas I believe it used to be a matriarchy. You know, the Iliad and the Odyssey, to me, almost, I haven't read them, but from what I've heard from your own talking on them, is that it was subtle, and so you can see the Iliad and Odyssey as forgiving past wrongs, as women-centric pantheons predate most of the more modern day, right? So you can read these as potentially, acknowledging the wrongs and forgiving, right? And saying, it's okay, right? We forgive you. And showing this love, because that's what happens, right? That's the main message of these epics is love and forgiveness, and to me, when you read it, like, you can read it as, yeah, we conquered them, right? But if you truly look deeper at the message, it is a redeeming of past wrongs and a forgiving of past wrongs. And that is why it is so impactful. And that is why Dante's Divine Comedy is also so impactful, because it's the same thing. It's doing the same thing, and I'll get to it later. Continuing on to my my next comment. So this is personal opinion. I think that there's no right answer to this. I think that it just depends on the type of person you are and the way that your brain works. But the question was asked 10 years with the Mona Lisa or 10 years with the Mandelbrot set. Personally, I am choosing 10 years with the Mandelbrot set. I thought this was a very intriguing question, and I think that the main thing is that you do not understand the intricacy of the Mandelbrot set. But to clarify, everyone has a different path, and so there isn't a correct answer. Both can have positive or negative results. For me, however, I guess I align a bit with Plato on the mathematical focus over the shade of the art. The art is beautiful, but it is limited. As such, it cannot properly represent life, as life is infinite. For a short observation period, the Mona Lisa may offer more wisdom, but a long observation of the Mandelbrot set is what I personally think would provide greater enlightenment, because as you evolve, it evolves with you. The Mona Lisa is limited by its creator. The Mandelbrot has no creator or is divinely created, not inspired, created. And so what I'm talking about there is that the way that the Mandelbrot set works is it's a fractal, and the universe is a fractal. And so by studying the nature of the Mandelbrot set, I think that you will come to find patterns in the Mandelbrot set, right? If like you truly analyze the Mandelbrot set, you would notice patterns in it, and you would then be able to correlate those patterns back to the real world and to life and help you get a better understanding. Because when you look at the Mandelbrot set, you are looking at a fractal, but you are also looking at the entire universe. There's infinite detail before you that you can continue spending the rest of your life observing, and you will never see it all, technically. However, because it's a fractal, you do not need to see the whole thing to know its truth. And understanding things like that and coming to that realization, I don't think you would get that from the Mona Lisa, but I think it's potentially one of the most impactful realizations you could get. And so while there is a lot of beauty in the painting of the Mona Lisa, I really don't think that it's that good. I think that the fact that people can have different impressions of it and look at it and see different facial expressions depending on their own interpretation, I think that that is very powerful. But I also think that a lot of other art can do the same thing. And so I don't think that 10 years with the Mona Lisa is going to provide you the same level of understanding and enlightenment, right? As studying the Mandelbrot set would. However, it depends on the person, right? Because if anyone just starts looking at the Mandelbrot set, you need to be primed for that. You can't just walk up and say, all right, I'm going to study this, right? Studying the Mona Lisa, that's more entry level, and that's what the point of art is. It's to, and that's what the difference is, right? Because art is taking a fraction of what the world is and refining it and simplifying it and enhancing its beauty and simplifying its beauty into a comprehensible manner. Whereas the Mandelbrot set is raw. It is unrefined. It is, unsimplified. It is the universe. The universe is that, right? It is a much more, it's not a perfect representation of the universe, but it is more akin to the universe than the Mona Lisa, right? And that is why I feel that depending on who you are and where you are in your journey, one is going to provide more benefits to the other, and depending on which one you choose, it could be detrimental, right? You could look at the Mona Lisa and, potentially take away certain realizations that just weren't intended for it. And that happens all the time. People get certain ideas in their head, they think they know best, right? And they don't, right? And so it happens. But personally for me, I do think that there is a lot of I would enjoy studying the Mandelbrot set a lot more, because exploring the Mandelbrot set would feel like exploring reality. Exploring the Mona Lisa would feel like flat. It's just, at the end of the day, it's flat. There's only so much depth to the Mona Lisa. And so there's only so much wisdom to be gained, without other intervention, right? Because you could leave, come back, and notice something new, but to sit there and observe the same thing, I think that you need to change. You need new life experiences in order to, spark new understanding. I don't know if that's required with the Mandelbrot set, but that's just my opinion. I feel like I talked on that enough. This was a comment that I had. So we were talking about why the devil is frozen and just sitting there lifeless pretty much in hell. And so what I put is the devil is akin to a black hole. Unconsciousness as gravity. Consciousness makes you lighter and less bound. Perhaps you can be... so before I go into the rest of this, consciousness is like almost comparable to energy. And I feel like the devil basically is passively absorbing or pulling in constantly. There's this constant pull towards unconsciousness. And so without being conscious yourself, you get pulled in, right? So you have to become conscious, become aware, and once you are, then you have the capacity to escape. But if you decide to remain unconscious, right, and go, then you're going to get pulled further and further into unconsciousness, which is into greater and greater sin. And there's a certain point where you're just about beyond redemption. And those are going to be the people that like are in the event horizon. These are the people being chewed in the mouth of the devil. They are so heavily unconscious, so deeply soaked in sin, that there's just about no chance of redemption for them. The only way they're getting out of there is through divine intervention, right? Someone with the capacity to and the consciousness strong enough needs to go in there and overpower, right? And it's just so like there's never a point where there's no saving you, right? And I'm going to get into that later. However, there are certain people that are far beyond saving, and it takes someone of significantly higher standing, right? Some high-ranking divine intervention to salvage them. You can't just... Not anyone can just walk in there and pull them out. Anyway, what the rest of this is that perhaps you can be a god unto yourself, but you must shut out the world to do so. The devil became his own god, but now must leech off God to sustain himself forever, and there is no return from this. And so pretty much what I think happened is that the devil decided that they wanted to be like God, but rather than using God and working with God to become a god themselves, they wanted to do it without God, right? They wanted to be separate from God. They wanted to do it for themselves. And by doing this, you basically, yes, you can become a god, but you will be a god unto yourself and within yourself. And everything external of you is you can no longer interact with, right? You are completely unconscious to the outside world, but internally you are your own god, right? You are the master of the universe, of your universe, right? But externally you are nothing, right? You're inanimate. You're just an inanimate object, which is what the devil is. And And in order to sustain themselves, because you decided, oh, I'm going to do it without God. The irony is that you're not doing without God, because what you're actually doing, and why there's always this constant drag of consciousness towards the devil, is because in order to sustain themselves, they feed off of the consciousness of God. And so while the devil thinks that they are a supreme being to themselves, externally, they are the most subservient being in all existence. And so there's this kind of dichotomy here, right? However, and I thought that this is funny because I wrote this before this was mentioned, and I didn't actually expect you to have this realization. But there is something beyond heaven, right? And so I think, going to like what the devil did is this is a regression. Perhaps through God, we can ascend beyond and maintain our consciousness while being a god unto ourselves, right? So the easy way to be a god is to completely shut yourself out from the rest of the world and go internally and never return, basically. However, the hard way is to be both a god unto yourself and externally, right? And to co-create, right? The end goal of God is to have people co-create with, right? Like we want to be able to co-create a heaven on earth, right? Well, God wants to co-create a greater heaven, right? And so the scales never end, and the level of ascension expands infinitely. But that's a little bit beyond our comprehension, because our consciousness is not evolved enough to really comprehend that. But I don't think that it is hubris to believe you too can be God or a God, especially unto yourself, right? Everyone is a God unto themselves, but they need to make it. They need to first accept that and believe that, and then start to turn that acceptance and realization outward, and realize that you don't just have control over your internal world, you also have control over your external world. And that is the first steps to becoming godlike. And this is the knowledge of good and evil, I suppose. And now I'm getting on a tangent because this wasn't one of my notes and I'm just thinking about this now. But, this is the knowledge of good and evil, right? Because with this knowledge, you can become like God, right? Or you can be like the devil, right? And follow evil, and go down a path of sin. Because when you realize that you can take control of this world, you can use that for good and use it to benefit the world and uplift humanity, or you can use it to domineer the world and control humanity. And right now we are leaning heavily towards the devil, which is again why I said we embody and are so interested in Inferno, because that is the world we live in right now. We live in a very hell-centric world, a very inferno-oriented world. That is what our society embodies. That is what our society lives by. And so, because of that, this knowledge of good and evil was something that we attained, but we're not necessarily evolved enough to maintain, right? And so what happened is that rather than using this knowledge for good, right, we used it for evil. And so what I believe happened is that pretty much people became enlightened, right? What I think happened is that people became enlightened. And because they became enlightened, they wanted to enlighten other people. And we got these, and we evolved and became very advanced and very sophisticated. We had things like um, plumbing and sewage and low tech air conditioning, like 5,000 years ago. 5,000 years ago, people figured out how to, have um, simplistic showers and sewage systems, right? That technology went away for thousands of years before it was finally reestablished, right? Because the Bronze Age was very advanced and very enlightened, and then over time, what happens is that um, corruption seeps in, right? And people began getting the knowledge of how to, like, people began getting taught the knowledge of how to basically control the world and all these things without actually having the wisdom of how to use it properly, right? And so they were still so focused on themselves rather than the world, and because of that, it led to a degradation of society and a collapse. And I feel like we're on a sort of brink here. But apparently, this is when being on the brink is where the best work gets done, which I find interesting. But I feel like there's a good reason for that. It's because when you're on the brink, divine intervention has to step in and do something to give people a chance to reset things, right? And so that's why we have the Iliad and the Odyssey, right? That was after the Bronze Age collapse. And then we had a very corrupt church, right? Which eventually led to the Renaissance after, Dante's Divine Comedy, right? And that led to the Renaissance, right? And then now we're heading into what I feel is, the brink of another dark age, right? Things are very corrupt. Things are very bad right now, in my opinion. And so now's the time for more great works, right? And I actually, maybe I should have picked this in there, but I don't know. I don't know. Jesus showed up in there somewhere, so that was also potentially another divine intervention, right? But Jesus is in between Dante and, these are almost in like 1,000-year chunks, right? Every 1,000 years, like we've got these divine interventions, rough, give or take. If we're looking at the numbers, it's something like that, right? And so I find that, I don't know, fascinating in my opinion, but yeah. And so continuing on, this sounds right. So saying that you can, getting back to what I was talking about, saying that you can be a god, right? This sounds like the devil's folly, right? And it sounds like I'm preaching that path, but that is only to the people that don't truly understand. Because when you truly understand, you realize is that you don't have to choose evil, right? You can choose good. And so this sounds like the devil's folly and thoughts, but I don't believe they were entirely wrong, right? I don't think that the devil was wrong for thinking they could be a god. They can be a god. Everyone can be a god. But they just have to actually put in the work to become that, right? And a lot of people think that that is an evil thing to say because they don't believe they have the power to do that, right? And they fear God, but there's no reason to fear God. I don't know. It just doesn't. That just doesn't make sense. So I wrote. They just took the easy. So the devil just took the easier path, the weaker and limiting path. Consciousness and ascension never ends. The scales just get larger. The devil can be redeemed and ascend if they wish, right? So if we really wanted to I think we could redeem the devil. And for us, the devil is basically just the collective unconscious, right? And so, in order to redeem the devil, this is not a one person job. This is a collective effort, right? We have to go down there, down to hell in droves. We have to create battalions, large armies of um, enlightened beings, and we need to go down there and with our ropes and grappling hooks or whatever, and pull them out, right? And it can be done, and it will be done. I just don't know when, right? But that is when the devil is redeemed from hell. That is the day we achieve heaven on earth, right? Um, because without that pull, without that drag down to the unconscious, right? Then there's no longer there, like, then what's pulling us to sin? What's pulling us into unconsciousness? There's nothing. The only place to go is to ascend higher, right? And so um that is what I think the mission is long term. I don't know if we'll achieve it anytime soon. I hope so, but we'll find out. Um, and so, um, my opinion on this, and I feel like you'll disagree, but Virgil seems to me like a bodhisattva, wise to how the world works. He knows the path, but chooses not to go. Yes, he appears to have some flaws, but that's a requirement to remain in the lower realm. I do not think this is a jab at Virgil, as in, the role that Virgil is given is not a jab or a way to demean Virgil or to criticize Virgil. I think that this is an act of love. And so I do not think this is a jab at Virgil. I do not think he is the ruler of hell, at least not in a bad way. It seems more like Dante forgave Virgil and offered him redemption for his past transgressions, and as an act of true love, in order for Virgil to atone for his sins of leading people to hell by writing the Aeneid, he now leads people into heaven. This is his choice. Hence, he is more like a bodhisattva, right? So he is aware of the path to heaven. He knows how to go there, but he chooses not to. Why does he choose not to? I don't think it's because he is afraid of God. I think it's because he knows that he has done wrong, and so he wishes to make it right, right? And so now he's doing his penance. But the penance is self-imposed, right? No one told him, God didn't tell him he has to do it, but he feels obligated to because he knows that he has wronged in the past, right? And so while there are certain parts where it seems like he's not an honest guide, I want to go through and read it myself, and then potentially I'll readdress this. But I feel like when you look at it from that lens, like, why does Virgil get selected to be Dante's guide? It's because Virgil is a bodhisattva. He is the go-to person to get anyone into heaven, right? Because he knows the way. But he's also on earth, right? So he's the bridge. He's that person that can lead you to heaven, but is earthly enough to be grounding, right? And not overbearing on a person, right? Because Beatrice could have just pulled Dante right up to heaven, but that's not the point, right? That's not the point. The point is to understand the world, and I'm going to get to that later, right? And so I think that Virgil is more of a guide for Dante than the ruler of hell. He is the ruler of hell in the sense that he is the most aware person potentially in hell, because he's aware of everything and how everything works, right? And so in a sense, he is the ruler of hell, but he is not in charge of hell, right? And so that is my opinion on Virgil. But we're going to move on now to heaven is, this is about the two rivers, right? So why do you have to drink from the two rivers? Well, heaven is perfect. You must be perfect to enter. The rivers purify. With clarity, you get to choose to rest, right? So when you drink from the first river, right, it gives you clarity, right? And allows you to decide, do I want to drink from the second river, right, and take a rest and go to heaven, or do I want to continue my journey? Do I want to continue growing, right? Because you drink from the river, you forget your past life, but all of the spiritual growth remains, right? And so now you're at a new base level, right? And so when you go back the next time, while you forget your past life, you have that understanding retained to some degree. And so you can keep going through cycles and keep growing and keep becoming a greater and more ascended being without actually going to heaven, right? Because in heaven, there's nothing there, right? In my opinion, it's probably just more of the same thing, just in a different way. And so, heaven is perfect. You must be perfect to enter. The rivers purify. With clarity, you get to choose to rest or start anew at your new base level of consciousness. You forget the life, but the soul retains its growth. I imagine you must drink from them to leave heaven as well, right? So if you want to, so you can leave heaven whenever you want to, right? But if you want to leave heaven and return to, as we'll call it, purgatory, then I think you might have to drink from the rivers again to then leave. Because my reasoning for this is just, I don't know, it just felt like it. But you need to forget you're perfect, right? You need to forget that, and then you need to be able to retain your memories. So really, you only need to forget that you're perfect, right? And then you're back at that base level, right? Because when you get out of purgatory, you get to the rivers, you drink, you forget, and then you get to choose, go to heaven or do it again, right? And so if you drink, then you realize, I think if you drink, it's not necessarily that you become perfect, but you just realize that perfection doesn't exist and that who you are is perfect, and you can go and rest, right? But then if you want to get back out there and get back to work pretty much and improving yourself, then you have to forget that wisdom basically and be like, oh no, there's more improvement to be done, because life is it's pretty much just a game, right? We're just out here to improve and to grow and become more and evolve and advance. That's all that life is defined by, is evolution and advancement. And so that's what we're chasing after, right? We're chasing after spiritual evolution. And so this is another critique of mine, because you seemed very adamant about this as well. But why does Virgil run away / disappear when Beatrice arrives? He loves Dante. He wants him to continue, but he cannot follow. If he does not follow, Dante may have doubt to continue, right? So they have different paths. If he truly feared heaven, all right. So I'm just going to say that if they have different paths, right? So Dante is oblivious to this, right? But he's thinking, oh, we're both going to go to heaven together, right? But Virgil is a bodhisattva. His path is to remain in purgatory or remain in hell and guide more people into heaven. And so he cannot follow Dante into heaven, not because he doesn't want to, or not because he can't, not because he thinks he can't, not because he's afraid, but because his path that he has chosen for himself is to remain and guide others into heaven, right? And so, as such, he knows that at a certain point, he has to leave, because if he doesn't leave, then Dante may not want to go either, right? He may want to stay with Virgil and help him and, join him on his journey, but that's not Dante's path. Dante's path is to go to heaven, right? And so, because of that, Virgil isn't there. I feel like I might have been messing the names up, but oh well. If he does not, but he cannot follow. If he does not follow, Dante may have doubt to continue. They have different paths. If he truly feared heaven, he would have never accepted to guide Dante in the first place, or at the very least, he wouldn't have gotten so close, right? So they're literally like basically at heaven's door right now, right? The parade is coming down to greet Dante. I think that that if Virgil was truly afraid of heaven and afraid of God and all those things, he wouldn't even get close, right? He would have never accepted the task of bringing Dante to heaven, right? Because Dante would have been like, hell no, I'm not going there, right? He would have ignored it because he's so afraid and such a coward. But he's not a coward and he's not afraid, because he knows what he's doing, right? He knows what his purpose is, and it's not, it's not entirely selfish. In a sense, it is selfish because he's doing it to try and, feel redeemed in himself, right? But at the same time, it's not selfish because he's helping to redeem other people as well. And so, I truly don't think that he runs away. Virgil does not run away at the very last second and bail. And the comparison that you gave that I disagree with is that you're saying that this was like graduating from college and your dad doesn't show up. No, that's not what this is, right? This is like your dad walking you down the aisle, right? Or something along those lines, right? Your dad walks you down the aisle, right? But at a certain point, he has to let go, and then the bride, we'll say for the bride, but realistically, the comparison's there, right? So your dad walks you down the aisle, but at a certain point, he stops, and you have to walk the rest of the way to your husband, right? That's what this is. This is a wedding ceremony, right? And so the reason why, though, that Virgil is gone is because let me read it out too. Let me see what I wrote here. The final steps to heaven must always be taken alone, as you are the only one who knows them. Virgil did not leave him. He literally couldn't follow any further, and he knew, right? Virgil knew, like he says goodbye at a certain point, right? And those are the last words that he says to Dante, and because Virgil knew that was as far as he could go. It wasn't because he was about to run, it was because he knew that this was as far as he could take him, right? But Dante still had more to travel. And so he says nothing, right? Because by saying anything, then Dante wouldn't have gone. But Dante needed to go. And so Dante continues walking, and he's totally oblivious to this, but he doesn't realize that Dante's the one that actually ditches Virgil. Virgil does not ditch Dante. But by the time Dante realizes that Virgil's gone, it's too late. He's already bridged the distance, right? He's already gone. And so it's not that Virgil runs away. It's that Dante moves on. Dante's the one that runs away from Virgil, and he doesn't even realize it. Because the final steps to heaven, only you can take. You're the only one that knows what steps need to be taken to get there. Because there's only so far a guide can take you. you have to finish it. You have to get the rest of the way. It's the same thing with every single ounce of wisdom that you attain. The teacher can say everything straight to your face, but you have to do the effort of comprehending and internalizing it and digesting it yourself, right? The teacher or the guide cannot make you understand. You have to be the one to comprehend. And so it's the same thing with you get when you are approaching heaven. You have to be the one that gets yourself there. No guide can walk you all the way to heaven. You have to walk the final steps yourself. And Virgil knew this. And so he says bye. And then Dante keeps walking. And then Dante doesn't realize it, but he's gone, right? And so that is why, Virgil did not leave him. He literally couldn't follow any further, and he knew. Dante just didn't realize he left him behind, right? And so at a certain point, you have to leave your guide behind to get the rest of the way. And so when Beatrice finally, gets to Dante, right? You know, Dante's all broken up. He's like, "Where's Virgil?" And she's like, "Forget about him. Don't worry about him." Because, he is not coming, right? At least not right now, right? Worrying about him is pointless. He's on his journey. You're on yours, right? And so she's basically saying, focus. You've got work to do still, right? He's on his path. You're on yours. Focus on your path, right? Because basically, I think this is hilarious because, this is pretty much how I feel. But Beatrice reprimands Dante at their meeting and offers no praise because the work is not over. He still has a ways to go. Dante is humanity in this case. Beatrice is Jesus, and she is pissed because after their death, the people got lost and went astray and did so much wrong. All the people in hell were a result of that. Humanity caused its own suffering. Fixing your own mistake is not worthy of praise. All he did was get back to where Beatrice left him, or Jesus left us. It is disappointment in our lack of will and abilities when we had all the tools and knowledge given to us. So this final part this is why the apocalypse is, also portrayed at the very end here, because this ending is prophecy. This is prophecy. This is the story of the Divine Comedy is humanity's story. It is still playing out. We are in purgatory. This is why the apocalypse comes after, right? Because when we finally ascend to heaven, right? That's just the beginning, right? When we create heaven on earth, right? Like I said, when we finally achieve heaven on earth, that's just the beginning. There's still so much work to be done, right? And so this is why Dante finally at the end of Paradise, Dante goes and meets with God. That's when Dante becomes a god themselves, right? And Dante is humanity, basically, in this sense, right? Is an allegory for humanity, and Beatrice, in a sense, is an allegory for Jesus, because she died and Jesus died, and Jesus could have been seen as our reason for living. Like everyone, like when Jesus was performing miracles, everyone believed in Jesus, right? But after Jesus stopped performing miracles and died, and was no longer on the earth, right? Because in theory, resurrection, but then goes to heaven. So it's the same thing pretty much. And so when Jesus leaves us, right? That's our turn to then use what we were taught and make something happen. But we didn't. And we fell heavily into sin, right? And so that's why, Dante goes down to hell, right? Because Dante in a sense, created hell, right? We created hell. We created hell on earth. That is our own fault. So for us to get through hell and get out of hell and get out of purgatory, there's nothing to celebrate there, right? We put ourselves there. Getting out of it is not impressive, right? Um, you know, that was never even supposed to be a part of the assignment, right? We were set up at the doorstep to heaven, right? To step in. And we instead chose to turn away. And over time, we fell deeper and deeper down the hole, right? And that's why purgatory ends in such an abrupt and aggressive manner. It's because it's like, yeah, finally, it's about time. Like, damn, like, what were you doing, right? And I just thought it was funny because I made it. I've actually before this, I made some videos pretty much with that intention, and for it to, like, I didn't know that that was in there, and that's just awesome, and I love that. And so, um, I was not expecting that ending, but I think it's really the best ending it could have been, and which just really goes to show that it truly is divinely inspired. Um, but I do think that the entire thing is an allegory for humanity, and um, we are working our way out of purgatory. Um, you know, in theory, in theory, um, but we will see, right? We will see. And so, um, I think that's all of the notes that I had. But yeah, I think that, you said, let's, spread the word of Dante, right? And spread this story, spread this message. And I am all for it. And I'm trying to do the same, but I'm, you know, uh, I don't know. I guess in limbo, I'm waiting. um, so yeah, let me know. Anyway, peace out.